Welcome to Share, stories of hope, adaptation, resilience, and empowerment. I'm your host, Holly. Thank you so much for joining us today. Cancer can leave a lifetime of trying to find balance. Join us as we discuss finding our way through the uncertainty of the future. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. We have Alyssa, David, and Dylan with us today, some wonderful and incredible young adult survivors. And today we are going to have a conversation about returning to normal life, if that's a thing, after treatment. So, Alyssa, I wanted to ask you just how has life been post-treatment and how has it been getting back to a normal routine?
I would say life post-treatment has been mostly good. Not always good, but it seems weird to think about getting back to my normal life because I'll never have that life again. There was that break in time and I will never go back. My life is completely different. I had a different career that I had started working when I was 15 and then diagnosed it in my 30s. And then I just decided I didn't want to go back to that. So my whole life is different. That said, post-treatment, there's struggles. I think struggles that all cancer survivors have. And it, sometimes it has been really tough. But sometimes it's been really beautiful. I've gotten really connected with the young adult cancer community, and that is my family. You guys are my family. And it's kind of good and bad, and yeah.
Dylan, you've had some really exciting things happen for you. Personally, I've been able to watch you graduate college and get into, a dream job of yours. So how has life been for you post-treatment?
Life has been exactly what I've wanted it to be. I saw this light at the end of the tunnel, and at one point it felt like it was a long way away. And eventually, I reached it, and, just being happy and healthy and surrounded by great friends and a super fun job, I, couldn't be happier. Very grateful to be where I am today.
That's awesome. How's it affected you, David?
Yeah, so my treatment, I was first diagnosed a month after I turned 20, and then I relapsed twice pretty quickly. And the second time, we had to try some stuff you normally wouldn't try. So I actually got paralyzed from the waist down for about 2 months. And then when I regained feeling in my feet and my legs, it took about 4 years from then to go from moving my foot to be able to walk without the use of any kind of aid. So long story short, my treatment ended up basically taking all of my 20s. So when I emerged from that, about 28 years old, who I was after that was not who I was right before I was diagnosed. Even when I had my bone marrow transplant, really I was a completely different person. And so adjusting back into life, one, after traumatic experience was difficult, but two, adjusting back, as you alluded, as a person who I was someone totally different than who I thought I was. So it took time, and I think I'm still kind of navigating that a little bit. Mm-hmm. I moved out here to kind of get away from that cancer guy aspect of me, because I didn't want to be defined by that. But since I've got here and I'm now engaged, I met someone who I did not know back then, but through talking to her and friends I met out here, and people get to know me, right? You can't know me unless you've talked to me about this experience. It's easily the most important, if you will, thing that's ever happened to me. It's on page 1 of my story. So there's no way you could know me without talking about it with me. I was kind of running away from that cancer guy moniker, but not that I've embraced it. I've just accepted that that's the reality. I am cancer guy. That's an enormous part of my personality and my identity. And it's not a pejorative, right? It's just the reality. And I'm working every day to be cool with that, to be okay with that.
But we also don't have to let it define us,
right,
and define who we are. But at the same time, we are cancer survivors. I mean, I will not be me without having had cancer. That's always going to be part of me. And I think it's important for our friends and family to know that, and also not forget it.
Yeah.
And not forget that we still have these things going on. We still have struggles as a result of our diagnoses.
Yeah. I mean, when I look in the mirror, I see there's literal scars, right? And then that's setting aside the metaphoric scars that exist from cancer too. So I found personally that when I was running from it, it was just, I was doing a disservice to myself to push it down and pretend like it's not there. I think that was ultimately harmful to my own mental health. So being more open about it, I made a joke that I told my fiance the whole story the first time we met in person. Like, it just started spilling out, and which maybe in other scenarios wouldn't have been the best strategy, but it worked. But that's kind of the attitude that I've taken a little bit more as time has gone on, to embrace it in that way, because as you said, it's for us to decide how important or not important something is. We are the arbiters of that truth. Yeah.
So would you say that the uncertainty of your future isn't so muddied anymore?
So when I relapsed the second time, I had the conversation that there's nothing more we can do. So that was now 12 years ago. That it's an insane place to be 22 years old, certain that you're going to die imminently, and then to live through that. It's surreal. And there's times when I kind of flash back to that moment and think about it. And, it was just me and my parents in the room. When the doctor left and I was with my mom, I've never seen pain like that, on my mom's face. It's hard to just wipe that away. It's not like every day I'm just, oh my God. But there are moments when these kind of flashbacks or whatever hit you. And so to be here, if I'm being honest with myself, I think there was a short time where I felt like it was a mistake that I was still here, that was my time, and that somehow I made it through. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a little bit of my own self-consciousness and self-doubt and stuff like that was bleeding through. But I've tried to work to think the opposite, that there's now a reason why I'm still here instead of that. Yeah.
Of course. And you brought up a really good thing, which is perspective and mindset. So how have you challenged yourself to really stay in a positive mindset after going through this experience? Dylan, what are some coping mechanisms that you have?
Really, it's just staying as positive as I can and taking the time to appreciate all the things I have in my life, even if it's something really small. We take a lot of things for granted, and I'm sure after everything, we've all been through, that we really appreciate the little things. And I think focusing on those is really important. I actually got to take a class in college called The Science of Happiness, and we had these really easy, fun homework assignments, but we just had to kind of take a breath and look at our surroundings and write down 3 things that made us happy. And it's just taking the time to appreciate those things and taking those big, deep breaths. Life isn't linear. There's always going to be its ups and downs. And so if you kind of just, take a big breath and appreciate the things you have and think about, what you've been through and where you are now, it's, really easy to kind of compare those situations. Right now, I'm dealing with normal people things, but, a few years ago I wasn't. And so, trying to compare those 2 periods of time, it just really kind of shows how far you've come as a person and as a survivor. And I think it's really important to give yourself credit, because, a lot of the time I, try not to think about everything I went through and focus on everything I'm accomplishing now, but I really did go through a lot, and you all went through a lot, and it's really important to just recognize that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like how you said appreciate the little things. I think that is something important to me. It sounds like for you as well. I felt like I really needed to slow down. I was one of those go, go, go people, working out all the time, always thinking about the next thing, thinking about my next travels, all these things going on all the time. And I struggled to sit. And I'm sure my family will be watching this and cracking up, thinking about our camping trips where I was like, I got to go on a run and I got to do all this and this. Why are you just sitting there? And cancer completely changed all of that. And I was like, whoa, I think I need to I need to slow down. I need to start appreciating things like walking my dog. I was like, oh, her little ears flop when she walks. I'm like, that is so cute. I had never noticed that before. And, and it literally stopping to smell the roses and just slowing down. And I think that was so, so important to me. I think there's something to be said about toxic positivity to where, I think as cancer survivors, we're also encouraged to not have bad days, right? Like, I think, one of the biggest things that I took to heart was it's okay to not be okay. And I heard this great comment when I was at a young adult cancer conference, and somebody had said, it's okay to have a glass half full day because the glass is refillable. Mm-hmm. And I have remembered that, and I have given that advice to other survivors. And I think about that because I think we can all have these really bad days. And maybe this is the day, or we have our annual checkup and thinking that, oh my gosh, today's going to be the day. And it's probably because I'm not anxious. And now I'm anxious because, I'm sure it's going to be the day that I'm going to be told that, I have relapsed. It is okay to feel down. And hopefully tomorrow will be better. And tomorrow I can feel better about it. And I can go back to those things that I wanted to do, is appreciate those little things and slow down and appreciate my family and my dog and all of my friends and everybody in my life and my job. And I think you can still build a really beautiful life and still allow yourself that grace to have those, not so good days.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really great point that it's okay to not be okay. I think, going through treatment, I had a lot of support, but a lot of people were always telling me that I was their inspiration, and I felt like I had, so much to live for and, give back and, be that light for other people. And there were times where I couldn't see the light, and it was hard to be that light for others. And I remember after my bone marrow transplant, I was stuck in a medical isolation for about a year. And I think about maybe 8 months in, I just hit a breaking point, and I just felt so trapped, and I couldn't really be that inspiration that I had been the past year for everyone else. And so I didn't even really try to show it. But I remember there was a point where I made one of those social media posts, and I was like, I am struggling, and, it's hard to always be positive. And, I always try to be as positive as I can, but there's definitely those times in your life where it's okay to recognize that you're not feeling okay. And I think it's really important to be transparent when you can, because at some points in your life, you do have to put yourself first, because, your mental health matters, and it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
That toxic positivity that you guys are talking about, I was at a fundraiser not too long ago, and there was this other survivor there who was talking about, and he was talking about how basically that he was grateful that he got sick, and he was happy because all these things came out of it, which I totally understand. And I'm not speaking for anybody else but me. I promise you, you will never hear me say that. I am not grateful that I got sick, and I am fairly confident that I will go to my grave feeling that way. That doesn't mean that I'm, that's going to ruin my life and it's going to encapsulate my brain. But I feel it. I'm allowed to still be upset that it happened to me. I don't think it was fair. I still am dealing with it in different ways. Again, I'm not defined by it, but I don't think I could ever, for myself, put a bow on it like that and say, well, thank God this happened to me.
It was traumatic.
Yeah, exactly.
Cancer is traumatic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And kind of what you're talking about with that inspiration thing, when I was going through it, it really bothered me. As time has gone on, I found myself thinking back on those moments with a much more forgiving, if you will, kind of attitude toward it. Because obviously we were the people that were going through it. But now that I'm a little bit more removed from it, I can see that people had no idea what to say to me, particularly adults adults, I was 20, but people who were in their 50s or whatever, who have known me my whole life, they didn't know what to say. So they were like, keep your head up, sport, that kind of thing. And
this.
You're right. And so, again, not to center their feelings, but I think now that I'm removed from it, I can kind of see that they weren't trying to say the wrong thing. They didn't know what to say, and they kind of stumbled over themselves, and they kind of stuck with that hyper positivity that I think is latched on to cancer in general.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think it makes it a little bit hard to want to move forward to get help as well, professional help, and go to therapy. Yeah. I think for me, I realized that I felt like I kept pretty positive through treatment because, what was the alternative? Just to be completely miserable? Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to do that. So I just kind of, I did my thing. I did what I was supposed to do and what I was told to do by my oncologist. And then it wasn't until after treatment, I finished my treatment in November. Mm-hmm. And so, Thanksgiving's coming up, and I wasn't particularly excited about Thanksgiving, which was a little odd to me. But then we moved past Thanksgiving into the Christmas season. I am one of those freaky Christmas people. I love Christmas and I love decorations. I love the season, and I was finding no joy in the season. And at that point, I was like, okay, something's wrong. I need to find help. I'm enjoying being around my family, but then I leave them and I feel very empty inside, and something's not right. And so I went to the social worker and I got a recommendation and got help, and that helped me to work through triggers and, frankly, work through all the way from diagnosis that I hadn't processed anything because I'd pushed it all aside, and I thought that was the thing to do. Yeah. I remember that I was proud one day that I came in and I was like, I had a trigger and I pushed it aside. She was like, no, please do not do that. And she was like, that's why you're here, because you've pushed everything aside and you haven't actually processed any of this. And we are 6 months in to your treatment and you have not processed any of it. And so I was like, okay. And that was so helpful for me. And it also helped me feel validated on my bad days that, I'm not doing anything wrong here. Mm-hmm. When all the people in my life are telling me, just be positive, it will help you heal faster and all of those things. And I know that they're coming from a really good place, but that still doesn't help. Right. And I remember when I started therapy, my parents were like, why do you need therapy? You've been so positive. And I'm like, I'm barely functioning here. I think, staying alive for my dog is about the only thing that's keeping me going. I'm very depressed, and I just didn't know what to say because I was happy to be around them and I could talk to them and be in a good space. But then I'd go home by myself and just be completely empty. And, and it was really hard.
Yeah. And just for anyone, outside of having a cancer diagnosis, the future can be scary. It can be unpredictable. So I know, Alyssa, you talked a little bit earlier about what sparks joy for you. So what sparks joy for you in your life now, and how do you find a balance post-treatment?
So first thing that brings me joy is my fiance. There you go, right? But kind of what we alluded to before, I feel this strange nostalgia almost for the things that brought me joy throughout my treatment. And so one of the things, I love baseball. I've been a baseball fan my whole life. And so during the worst time of my treatment, so my dad and my family got me an iPad so I could watch it. At the time, they were called the Cleveland Indians, now the Cleveland Guardians. And I watched every game, right? And this was right after that time I told you where I wasn't really sure. I had just gotten paralyzed. I didn't really know what my future was going to be. If I'm being honest, I'm not even sure if I cared if I lived or died, but I cared if the Guardians won, right? And so while that sounds bleak because you only care about one thing, to care about one thing is exponentially more than caring about nothing, right? So in a certain sense, this kept me in the world, right? So now, 12 years removed from that, I feel such a love for the Guardians and the things that brought me joy during those times. I remember when I was going through treatment, when I was an outpatient, I would think, like, as soon as I would get in the car in the morning, we'd head to the hospital at 9 a.m. and I knew I wouldn't get back to my house till 5:30 or 6. But the whole time I was there, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to get through this and I'm going to get in bed back at home and watch a movie with my family. And so the day was terrible. but I can remember that time at night when my family and I would watch a movie. And so I can think about those moments. And that's like this weird thing that brings peace to me when things start stirring up, when I get these kind of flashback moments of I guess that's what it is. When I think about the flashback of the bad thing, I try and think about that next thing after that brought me a little bit of solace after that moment happened. And that's kind of how I approach these new things that have come up in my life since then.
Yeah. So not disregarding the past, but finding joy in the little things that you can take with you to the future. What are some things for you, Dylan, that have really sparked joy for you in finding a balance post-treatment?
Yeah, I think it was being able to get an education. I think having that normal experience, going to college and making friends, missing 2 years of high school was not easy for me. So I think just having that opportunity and support to, go to college full time and really learn and grow and build those relationships that I had been wanting to even make. I felt so isolated not being able to go to school. So I think, being able to go to college and kind of make up for everything I lost, it brought me a lot of joy just to be able to make friends and make new relationships. It was just something that, every child and teenager and adult should be able to do. It's something crucial in life. And I think that now, being out of college and, working in the real world, I've made some great friends at work. And I think that friends really bring me the most joy because there was a time where I couldn't see friends. And I think it's just really important to surround yourself with the people that you love and that make you happy. And so I definitely think I need to work on those moments when I'm alone because I try to always surround myself with people, but it's really important to take those moments to yourself and reflect.
Yeah, and you've accomplished a lot. I've had the pleasure the last few years of personally knowing you and seeing you accomplish things, which is just a joy to see that happen. You're welcome. And these decisions are big for a lot of us. This is what we do. We go to school. We hopefully, go into a trade or graduate college. We find a companion, right? Mm-hmm. So have you had any challenges with, making big choices or decisions? How has, that impacted your decision-making post-treatment? Do you have a fear about it? Or has it really opened up your mind to, take risks? And if, something great comes out of it, amazing. And if it doesn't, how do you deal with that?
For sure. I'm definitely one to take risks just because I've seen my life at risk. I, take almost every opportunity I can get just because I'm very grateful to still be here and I want to, live my life to the fullest. So, for me, it's always, saying yes to things. And obviously, when I know I'm not able to, I, won't accept the invite. But I think it's one of those things where I like to keep myself busy and do things that I enjoy. And so I think it's really, important to take the risk. I think a lot of things can come out of it. And I think a lot of those things are good, at least for me and from my experience. Coming out of college, I got a job with Disney. And so it was my first time physically away from home and away from my parents. They were by my side every step of the way during treatment. But I just couldn't say no to an opportunity that I've always dreamed of. So coming down here and living out my dreams was something that I couldn't not take. It was a huge blessing and I'm very grateful.
Definitely.
I think I'm trying to get to that point because there's a part of me that wants to take risks and I move. But I remember when I finished my treatment, there was a moment where I was looking around okay, well, what did I win? And they're oh, go get a job. And I was oh, that's the reward is that I just go work. So as much as I want to take risks and really go full throttle, I'm tired. I really am so tired. I made a joke to my mom when I first finished treatment. I was I'm being honest with you. If there was a old cancer retirement center that I could go live at, I honestly might do it. I'm exhausted, and you don't put this on a resume. You know what I mean? I felt so far behind the 8 ball that I felt like I needed to go full throttle, and I want to, because I absolutely do want to, take the bull by the horns and live life to the fullest. But at that same time, I felt like so much energy and was taken out of me that I kind of have to be my own motivating coach. Just like, no, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this. And so I love what you said. I'm trying to get to that point myself where I'm just saying, like, come on, David, like let's do it. Because if I'm being honest with myself, I think my impulse a lot of the time is to take the safer choice that's a little bit less, that requires a little bit less energy and time because of that exhaustion that I still kind of feel.
Yeah. Gosh, decision making. It has.
It's not easy. Never will be.
I mean, I had again switched careers after my diagnosis, so things changed very rapidly, and that was a big step. I mean, I was in sports medicine. I'd gotten a master's degree. Wow. I had been working in that for over a decade at the point when I got sick. And I just decided, I just don't want to do it anymore. And that set me on a whole new path, which has been wonderful. One thing with decision making, I like to live my life with big and small adventures. I love to travel. I go to Europe every year, and that's something really big in my life. But at the same time, I don't know about you all, COVID kind of changed everything for me. And while, yes, I still travel, but that has, that has completely changed my mindset as far as what I feel like I can and cannot do. Because I didn't get through go and beat cancer to then be taken out by a virus. And so I think it's been very, very difficult while I'm still taking, basic precautions and still masking places. I do bring that into my mind quite a lot as far as what I'm going to do. And I wish, it's hard to have gone through all of this and then be almost kind of taken a step back because of COVID. And that just kind of sucks. But, we still try to live our lives, I think, in the best ways that we can and the ways that we feel the most safe. I definitely want to validate all of those people who are still very severely immunocompromised and can't leave their houses.
Definitely. What's your community look like today? What's your support system, and how does that help you day to day?
That was an interesting, me deciding to leave home was a pretty big decision. I think it just kind of happened organically, but I feel lucky to have been able to move 2,000 miles away from where I'm from and still feel like I'm supported. And again, it's not like every day I need to cry about what happened with my cancer, but there is definitely times when, COVID was a big one. Like, my fiance and I had just moved in together then, and the uncertainty, it's like, am I at more risk? I don't know. I have no idea if I'm more at risk. I don't think anybody does. So what I mean is, like, I have support from her. I have support from her family. I have support from our friends, So those times where I felt like I wanted to talk about something, I've never felt like there wasn't anybody there out here to talk to. And also, my brother's one phone call away. So I feel very fortunate that I have a community that is supportive when I need it.
Do you guys find with the non-cancer community, so with your friends, with your family who have not had cancer, that it's difficult to get them to understand really what you've been through and who you are now? Obviously you met your fiance after, but I find that really difficult sometimes to get them to really understand what's going on now, because they're like, oh yeah, you're done.
Yeah.
You've been done a long time. And I'm like, but
yeah,
am I ever really done? Because I feel like I'm not.
Yeah, my impulse through most of my treatment was like, make jokes. And so
did that a little too much as well. Exactly. Yeah.
So I think the only people that like really saw how bad it was was my direct family, the 5 of us in our family. And I remember I was at a New Year's party at my best friend's house. I'd known him my whole life. And by the end of the night, it was just me and our other really good friend. And somehow this stuff just came up. And I was open and honest about it in a way that I had never been before to anyone outside of the family. And I could see, I remember I was talking one time, I looked up and they were both crying. And I was like, oh, I didn't even mean it like that. I was just saying what happened. And I realized that they didn't know. And I had kind of shielded people from it a little bit. And so to your point, I have absolutely experienced that, where people, I don't think they're intentionally trying to keep it at arm's length, but they don't understand, maybe they can't understand. And so they're not as integrated into it as people who were there, frankly. So,
Yeah, I definitely had those friends that stayed really close to me in high school. I had my best friend there when I shaved my head and for those moments. So I definitely had those friends who watched me go through my journey. And I have new friends now who weren't there when I was sick, but I'm very open about my experience to the point where I feel like my friends can understand a level of what I went through, but they'll never truly know, and no one really will ever truly know because, it was my experience. And I think it's something that I struggle with even to this day, but especially back then. I didn't have anyone to relate to. I was a junior in high school with leukemia, and I know we're all adults here and had leukemia, but that it is common in young children. And so, being in the pediatric hospitals, I saw a lot of little kids, sick, and that was, hard to see, but it was also hard for me because there was no one my age that I could relate to. And that's the reason I'm sitting on this couch today, is I didn't have anyone my age or anyone that, looked like me or had a life like me. And I really needed that image. I didn't know what it looked like. I only know what my journey looked like. And I think it was really hard because even though I had this great support from my family and friends and community and school, I didn't have that direct relationship with someone where they understood what I was going through,
Right.
Obviously my parents, they never left my side. I always had someone spending the night in the hospital room with me. And, they obviously knew the most of what I was going through, and my doctors, but it was hard not having anyone my age to relate to. And looking back, I still wish that I did have that, because I wonder how my life would have been different at the time.
Yeah. There's something to be said about the young adult cancer community and getting, involved with that and involved with other people, because they do get it. They do understand. They've been through it, even with a different kind of cancer. I've said for a long time that, I went to my first Cancer Con, which is a young adult cancer conference. And I've said that LLS and my treatment team, of course, saved my life. But Cancer Con and the young adult community saved my soul. That was what I needed. Connecting with that community. I remember the very first, one of the very first sessions where I was like, yes. There was a guy up there, and he just mentioned night nurses, and you just hear collective, oh. And I'm like, oh, these are my people? They get it? And it was something that was so simple that you just have to say a word, and everybody in that room completely understood exactly what he was going to say next. Yeah. And, you could go up to somebody with a different kind of cancer and completely connect. And, they would understand with very, very few words. And so I think that has been really important along my cancer experience. To have that connection with the young adult community, so that, you have those people that you can turn to. I know so many people now when I'm feeling upset about something, I can reach out to them, and they get it. They get it. They can talk me through it, or just validate my feelings that I'm feeling upset about something, or something happened, or, a friend relapsed and I want to talk about it with somebody, because if a friend relapses, there's only so much that, you know, your family's going to understand or your friends are going to understand. Whereas it's so deeply personal when that happens, or when a friend passes away from cancer. And it's so deeply personal because you can see that happening to you. You can see that in yourself. And that sets a whole other part of anxiety there. But, you know, I think having that community, I think for me was just so important.
Yeah, I felt super lucky. So I actually started when I was 20 at an adult hospital. So I was the youngest person there. And then when I relapsed, I went to Cincinnati Children's Hospital at 21. So I was like the oldest person there. What you alluded to, Dylan.
Yeah.
It's surreal. I mean, when I was there for my bone marrow transplant, the painting on the wall behind me was this enormous tiger. And I'm like having a conversation.
Yeah, I'd be in the operating room. There'd be like
surreal.
Despicable Me minions on the wall, you know,
the doctors
Disney
are wearing
princesses.
Exactly. They're wearing like 101 Dalmatians masks. And you're like, this is insane. But at the adult hospital, when I was 20, there was this other patient there named Brandon who was 26. And I remember my first day there, he walked in and he like started calling me punk because I was like the new kid. And I remember my mom and the nurses were like kind of uncomfortable. And I thought it was funny. Like he was just, you know, but he was kind of like my cancer patient Jedi master, so to speak. And like, if I had questions, I would go to him. He was so, like he came into my room one time and he was like, David, they're on me because I'm down to smoking like 5 or 6 cigarettes a day. Like I used to smoke a pack and I'm down to that. I'm like, Brandon, they're going to be on you until the number is 0. Like they don't want you to smoke at all. But he was such a funny guy. And like, he would literally, like he'd come in and he'd be like, what chemo are you getting tomorrow? And I'd tell him, and he's like, okay,
what are you drinking?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He had a couple relapses. So he touched them all. So he would give me like, this is what's going to happen. This is what happened to me. Yeah. I had to shave my head multiple times because he shaved my head for me the first 2 times I had to do it.
Wow.
So yeah, that having that community, having someone there to even if you're not even talking about it, to just be 2 bald guys sitting in and of itself, like meant something.
And somebody that your age too. And I think, you know, I was only on the adult side, and so I don't have the experience with the ped side, but I remember, everybody was 60 plus in there. And so I remember when I'd walk into the infusion room and see a young adult, it was like,
yeah,
you and me.
Yeah.
We're going to sit next to you. Can I sit over there, please,
Yeah.
so I can have somebody to talk to?
Yeah.
And, you know, it was almost refreshing to walk in there and see somebody, as sad as it is, you know, you don't want to see young people get cancer, but it was so refreshing to go in. And I was like, I can have somebody to talk to today that's kind of like me.
When I was on the adult world, this band came to visit like the patients. And this woman popped her head in and she goes, have you ever heard of this band? And I was like, yeah, I have. And she pops her head. She goes, this guy in here says he's a huge fan. And so these guys run in. No one on the floor had ever even heard of them. And so because I was 20, everybody else was 65. They'd never heard of this band. And so these guys came in to visit these cancer patients and everyone was like, thanks for coming. Who are you? And so they were so thrilled that there was like a younger person who had heard of them. But yeah, there was moments like that where the age discrepancy between everybody else there was so apparent.
Yes.
And it was just kind of a weird spot to be in. But
So the roadmap of survivorship, of treatment, of diagnosis, at times, yes, it can be linear, but roads do have twists and turns and, you know, detours. Someone out there who's watching us today, Dylan, like you said, is looking for their community, is looking to resonate for someone just like them. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to that person watching today just to have hope, to be grateful, and to persevere forward into the future without fear?
I mean, I'd say, finding that the power of the cancer community, the blood cancer community, which obviously you never want to be a part of, but once you are a part of it, truly, I can't speak to the power of it. I was at a wedding, like 2 of my best friends that I knew my whole life, they married each other, and I was at their wedding, and so I was a groomsman in it, so, you know, I'm kind of, people see me, and I was sitting by myself. At the time, I was still walking with a cane, so I couldn't really move that much, and this guy was coming toward me. I knew I recognized him, but everyone's from my town, so whatever. He sat down, and he told me who he was. He's the father of a young woman I was in the hospital with, and she had died like 2 years earlier. And he came over to tell me how happy he was to see me doing well and that he was proud of me. And I just started tearing up, and he started tearing up, and he put his hand on my hand, and we just kind of cried for a few minutes. And then he patted me on the shoulder, stood up, and he said, "Good luck, son," and he walked away. And I think about this moment all the time. It is probably the kindest thing that I've ever experienced in my whole life. I didn't recognize this man. Seeing me had to elicit pain for him because I had to remind him of his daughter who passed away. And he still went out of his way to tell basically a stranger that he was there for him and he supported them. You can't find that a lot of places, right? And obviously this man, he went through terrible trauma, and you wouldn't wish that on anyone. But I think it speaks to the power of this community. So I guess my advice is, if you can find support groups, if you can find events where you can be around either survivors themselves or families of survivors, that connection and that kindness and love that you feel from them is something that's unique from anyone else you could meet in your whole life. And there's power beyond that. It's not just a little moment that you have and you go live your life. It does something to your heart and your soul. I honestly think that. And so, yeah, I would say seek out opportunities if you're comfortable. Like, obviously, if you don't want to be involved in that, I get it. But if you feel like there's a part of you that's missing something, I can assure you that talking with other survivors and families can help fill that piece that you feel like is missing.
Yeah, I completely agree about, getting connected with the young adult cancer community, or if you're older, just the cancer community in general. But, again, like I talked about earlier, I am a big proponent of professional therapy. Big proponent of it. I think I would not be where I am right now had I not done that and learned coping skills. Because while I would like to say that the triggers completely went away, they did not. And when I think now and have anxiety about, relapsing, even though I'm now considered cured, I'm past 5 years, I still think about relapsing. I still see those outliers out there that have relapsed after 9, 10 years. And I'm like, okay. And, thinking about that, thinking about other cancers, what other cancers that I could get. And so, I really feel like that helped me so much with developing coping skills. And anytime I have, I'm sure you guys have those symptoms that come up where you're like, okay, that's the same symptom that I had before I got diagnosed, and now I'm stressed, and now I don't know what's happening. Now I can almost logically take a step back and be like, wait a second, do I really feel like I'm relapsing here? Or what is this symptom from? And really kind of try to figure it out. And that almost has helped me calm down and, approach this in a logical manner rather than a completely emotional manner, that this is it. This is the end. I'm relapsing. And, so I think therapy helped me a lot. And then continuing to grow, and learn new skills and learn those things about, giving yourself grace, and it's okay to not be okay. And I hate to use those cliche, phrases though, but they're true and they matter. And I think, so many cancer patients going through it right now just don't understand that it's okay to just go through however you're going to go through it. And it's okay to not have a completely positive experience or be thankful that you got cancer. I had an AML friend like me who was 3 years ahead of me. She said she thanked God that she got cancer. I was like, I don't think I will ever get there. Yeah. I will never get to that point where I'm thankful, even though cancer has set me on to just this beautiful trajectory of life. As difficult as it can be, I feel like I'm on this beautiful trajectory that I would have never gotten to had I not had cancer. At the same time, we're not grateful for it.
Right.
That was traumatic. We are not grateful for it. But I think that, my advice again would be to get, at least get a little bit of professional help to get those skills, develop those skills and understand what you can do. A lot of people journal. That was something that my therapist had me work on. And there's so many different ways that you can cope with those future anxieties, those future triggers that you might have. And so I think that's really important for me.
I definitely think it's important to seek help even if you don't think you need it.
Yes.
I feel like I waited too long to do therapy during my treatment. And, by the time I had started therapy, I was kind of re-entering my life. And, I went off to college and stopped and, everything ended up being okay. But I wish I had kept with it longer because I think that no matter what, like we were saying earlier, like life is not linear and, issues are always going to arise, and it's important to just have someone to talk to who is there to listen. And
and someone who can provide you with tools.
For sure.
I think too. I wish that healthcare providers would, recommend this stuff earlier in the treatment. I feel like they'll have a chaplain come in, right, and a social worker. But I feel like they should say, hey, this is something that may benefit you. This is why. Maybe you should look into it now. Because when I went to go get a recommendation from my social worker, she was like, oh yeah, this is totally common. You can just get through treatment, just do what you have to do, and then you completely break down. And I was like, well, I really wish that I would have started therapy before I completely broke down. But here we are. So this is our starting point now, and now we can work on it. But I feel like you, I feel like I wish I would have started earlier and not waited until I was so far down to try to start building back up again.
Yeah. So I was lucky that throughout my treatment, they had psychologists come in and talk to me like all the time. The other thing that music therapy, I couldn't move my legs, but I would bang on a drum or something and there was a catharsis to it, even though I was awful at it, just to do it in and of itself. So that would be something, whether you're musically inclined or not, I think that might be something to look into. If nothing else, it's fun. It's fun and it's cathartic.
Even just listening,
exactly.
to the strum of the guitar, or piano,
It was awesome. It was very, very helpful to have stuff like that and have that support throughout my treatment.
Yeah.
And one thing for me that really helped me was just, if I saw an event that involved cancer survivors, I tried to be there. Like, I think the biggest one was Light the Night, and just seeing survivors in front of you and, being in that survivor circle and seeing the big lights go up. It's just one of those moments that it's just so beautiful and, everyone's crying together and hugging their families. And I think something like that where you just see that everyone has gone through something similar and everyone's there for the same reason, it's just really powerful and you can feel it in your soul. And I think that it's something that, everyone going through, treatment right now should consider, just because it's something that is so important to think about it and have community. And, fundraising and volunteering brought me a lot of joy and hope. I've done it for several nonprofits and I've met so many great people through it. And just that feeling of giving back is something you can't beat.
The Survivor Circle is so special.
It is.
At Light the Night. I get chills thinking about it. And I've gone to, 7 now. And I still get chills thinking about it, talking about it. It's so neat being just surrounded by all these white lanterns and all of these other survivors. And you're looking around while everybody's raising their lantern. But then you just see all the supporters around that circle too, and it's just like being enveloped in love and community. And I've had chills now just talking about it.
Most of the lanterns you see are red lanterns, which is the supporters there. And I think just seeing that overwhelming amount of love is just something that's such a good feeling,
I went to my first one as a survivor last summer. It was packed. It blew me away and it caught me by surprise. I had went to one when I was sick, but I don't really remember. And so I was there and it just totally caught me off guard. I was actually volunteering at the event, so I wasn't even really, I was kind of going there to do a job. But then toward the end of the night, and we went there, I was not really expecting to be emotional when I was driving to the event. And then, in the middle of the circle, and I just become a puddle. Like, it just totally caught me by surprise. And that's like the weird dichotomy of this whole thing, is that it elicits like sadness and pain because of what we experienced and people who've lost others. But there's also this element of love and joy that combine together to create an emotions that I only experience in this context. The context of cancer is the only thing that creates this smorgasbord of emotions. And so, and I think that's why there's just so much power to it. And that's why you're looking around, you're making eye contact with strangers and you feel like you know them. And it's a pretty unique experience, but it's incredible. So I would absolutely suggest Light the Night for anyone looking for that kind of community.
And there's something about just like talking to other cancer survivors or cancer patients. I don't know. I just absolutely love it. I love meeting somebody and they're like, oh yeah, I had cancer. Even if it was a totally different cancer, it's like immediate connection. I think it feels cathartic as well to talk to people and then also, give advice to the people that have come behind you and hopefully make their cancer experience a little bit easier than yours was. And I think that brings a lot of, purpose into my life, is trying to make it easier for everybody else who's come behind me.
Yeah.
One of my best friends from home, his young son, 5 years old, got diagnosed with ALL a couple of years ago. He's in remission now. But when he called me to talk about it, one, it was like this full circle moment that I can't believe I'm old enough now that my friends have kids. But then also, I didn't really think of myself as being helpful or have anything, you know what I mean? But as I talked to him, he could probably answer better than me, but I do think it was helpful for him to talk to someone who had been through, and obviously, and the other thing that was crazy is, it was 10 years later, so treatments are different, so it's not like a one-to-one comparison, but some of the emotions and stuff that you feel are similar. Again, that community, and I'm realizing that we are the community. We're talking about it externally, but we are the community too, that it is helpful to talk to people who've had those
definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you all, Dylan, David, and Alyssa, for being here today. And thank you for being a part of this project and helping to build a stronger young survivor community out there. We can't thank you enough. And just take this with you, be advocates for our community, and just remember that every story that we share is another life touched.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Do you want to do a toast?
Yeah, sure.
Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
To survivorship.
To survivorship.
Yes.
Today we are talking with Julia Levitt, licensed clinical social worker specializing in psycho-oncology. Julia, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So today our guests are having a conversation on the uncertainty of their future and finding balance. Why is this such an important conversation to have?
Because I think it really highlights the challenges that our young adult cancer population face, both during treatment and then as they evolve and find a relationship with their treatment post their active phase of cancer treatment. What we know about this population is it's a time of development and meeting developmental milestones. And then what happens when that intersects and collides with a cancer diagnosis? So you may have someone that has moved thousands of miles away from their family to start their first career and then have this cancer diagnosis and go through a few years of treatment, and all of their peers are moving forward and accelerating in their career, and they are dealing with a medical diagnosis, and then treatment's over. And how do they pick up those pieces and go back to that place that they may have been, or find a new path to what they want to be doing?
Yeah. So balance seems to be a very big word, especially when you are, getting back, into your car and driving through that roadmap of survivorship. So what are some things that, survivors can take with them as skills to really find balance post-treatment and post-diagnosis?
From the start, it's so important to remember there's no one right way of doing something. Cancer is not a fixed state. It's an evolving journey. And knowing how you feel one day at the end of your treatment might not be the permanent feeling that resides with you. Being able to constantly pause and reflect and check in with yourself and ask yourself, why am I feeling this? What's coming up for me that I'm going back to the cancer center for the first time and I can't concentrate on anything and I'm so anxious. It's also a time where many will report sitting with many different feelings and how to make space for them. And they can be polar opposite feelings. And recognizing that two things can be true at the same time and not one takes over. And being able to find a community, being able to tell your support network what you need, even at this time when treatment is different and the intensity of needing caregiving might be reduced, but also being able to share your narrative. It's your story to tell. No one else can tell it for you.
Yeah. So on today's episode, our guests are representing the young adult community. What are some of those challenges that young adults may face after their diagnosis and into treatment and survivorship?
Sure. Severe isolation is what we know comes up, feeling very isolated, having to have taken this major pause. Let's think about what's happening in your life. It's this one time where you're finally feeling an autonomous individual. You may have made a decision about where you're going to go to college, or that you're going to take your driver's test next week, or you're about to buy your first home, or you're, really striving in interpersonal relationships and thinking about marriage and starting a family. And all of those things get thrown into a blender and change, and the path you thought you had is now going to look different. So recognizing that, this is an underserved population in many ways. They enter a health system where for most of their life, maybe they were seeing doctors once a year for well visits, not having the understanding about how to even navigate the health system or insurance. Maybe they've been on their parents' insurance and haven't ever had employer insurance. We know that they're behind financially because they're just building their nest egg and figuring out what they want for them. So all of that is going to impact what happens once the very thick active phase of treatment is done.
Yeah, definitely. And what are some resources that you could recommend for those listening today that just want a little bit more information?
Sure. I think taking it back to LLS is always promoting finding your place in your journey survivorship, whether it's from an online chat to going to an actual event and building that community. I would say that checking in with your actual institution, what resources do they offer in terms of support groups or connecting you to a mental health professional? Because it is a time where you're figuring out who you are, as many of your peers are, but now with this other added layer of having just gone through a cancer experience and the need to be able to have a place where you can really talk out your thoughts. So whether that's an individual therapy or with a support group, meeting other young adults who can express that shared experience of, oh, I don't feel so comfortable in my body anymore because I have scars from treatment or I've lost my hair. And so I'm also thinking about getting back into the dating world, but do I explain all of that on a first date, why my hair looks this way? And so being able to find that. There's wonderful organizations that are just dedicated to the young adult cancer community that help to reduce that feeling of isolation and help to just open up a whole new world post-treatment.
So the word therapist could have a little bit of scariness or stigma to it.
Absolutely.
How do you recommend those who maybe are fearful of seeing a therapist? What are the benefits of having a social worker in your corner?
So I always like to think of it as that we're born with a set of tools, and we carry this toolbox with us throughout life. To help us when we face challenges or need help making decisions or how to have better communication with the people in our life. But at times we might need to sharpen those tools or go back to the hardware store and buy new tools for that toolbox when there's major life challenges. And so that's how I sort of look at being able to come to a therapist and know that this is a place where I can devote once a week for 50 minutes or 60 minutes of just sharing what's on my mind, looking to help me to put together what I just went through. Many people describe like they come out of treatment and it's like they're in a cloud in a daze and being like, wow, did I really do all of that? Did I put all those things on pause? And being able to really break down and assess who they are, what they want their relationship to be with cancer and how they share that with their outside world and tell their narrative.
Yeah, definitely. So just a really great, versatile tool to have in your toolbox, not only to carry through diagnosis, through treatment, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. So,
and I like to always say to try as the best you can to replace fear with curiosity. So if you are fearful of entering therapy or seeking help, or when you're at a survivorship visit and you're speaking with your oncologist or nurse practitioner and they bring up a question about mood and you're worried to be open, just be curious. How can you add more support to what's happening in your life? What will therapy bring out for you? And so to really go in with that mindset of replacing fear with curiosity.
So a lot of our survivors kind of live on this teeter-totter between hope, happiness, and anxiety and fear. So what piece of advice would you give to our listeners today who may be going through this experience themselves? They may be a caretaker or even someone in our field. What advice would you give to our listeners today just to cope with those fears and anxiety?
I think the best thing is to lean into what you're feeling, not to push it aside or to make light of it, or the opposite, or think, oh, there must be something really wrong with me if I'm 6 months out from treatment and I'm still really struggling and don't know what I want to do. All of that is okay and normal, and this is your path, and to stay in your lane and decide what is best for you. And it might not be best for the person that you met at the, infusion center, but that's what's working for you now. And to be able to really find your way and be patient. Time, it's going to take time. And even when you have it figured out, you may change how you're doing things. And it's a season of life. And we have many seasons of life. And giving yourself permission to change your mind. And lastly, I think one of the most important things is throughout this journey, many young adults report that they really never knew that they had a voice or that they could advocate for what they needed. Yeah. And that doesn't stop when you're in the thick of treatment or in a cancer center. That will be for the rest of your life, how you advocate for your needs and what you need in relation to your cancer experience.
So just having those tools in your tool belt and talking with a professional, gaining the confidence to really take back control of your life and live it to the fullest. I think it's a beautiful thing to have a resource of a therapist nearby.
Absolutely.
Available to you.
Yeah.
Well, Julia, thank you so much for speaking with us today. And I hope you join us for the next episode of Share.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for being a part of our conversation today. And remember, every story shared is a life touched. See you again soon.